The question that we will try to answer in today's call is, along with the pandemic crisis, there's an economic crisis coming, and we start to see that there might be some shortages on food and perhaps on cash, perhaps, and on other things. And so we want to discuss if that's possible or not. And one possible shortage that may or may not happen is water shortages. If there are interruptions in the electric grid or in the water utility water systems, we may find those shortages the way that happens here in Miami with hurricanes and things like that. So for the call, we have an expert, Alex von Welczeck. Please, Alex, correct me when I pronounce your last name.
Von Welczeck. Thank you, Will.
Von Welczeck. As always, we have Nathanael Miller, my business partner in crime and our CTO at cureathome.org. I have a very brief intro of Alex that I'll read because it's impossible to memorize. So Alex is an impact entrepreneur in the clean technology and renewable industries. He works globally with impact investors, strategic enterprises, and associations to accelerate the sustainability revolution. He enjoys a 25 plus year track record at finding, building, and managing technology-based businesses that are turning gray to green infrastructure in harmony with nature. He's the chairman and president of impact startup Sky H2O, a water technology and solutions business and water as a service provider based on unique and proven atmospheric water generation. Alex is the principal of Clean Power Advisors LLC, an advisor at Power Station 247 and Carflex. Two things surprised me of Alex. One, he has successfully transacted businesses in 22 different countries. That must be some type of world record in itself. The second one, when I was looking at Alex in LinkedIn, I realized that we have 2,169 mutual connections on LinkedIn. That must be another world record of number of connections between two people, and that points at all the wasted time that we were clicking and accepting on people's invitations, so that the last part doesn't speak highly of us in terms of time management.
Well, let's just say we've been around the block a few times, or maybe around the world a few times.
Nathaniel?
Yeah, Alex, it's great to have you, and all you guys out there. Thanks for joining the conversation. You know, we're talking about these threatened infrastructures, and those threatened infrastructures at the hands of failing institutions or institutions that are not effective at addressing some of the fundamental needs that we have. Alex, I'm really excited. I've been tracking Sky H2O for about 2 years now, and just really excited to hear a little bit about your thoughts. We might start with just a real quick summary of what is Sky H2O. We here at home we purport to have the app and the box. You have a very different kind of box. Can you open up a little bit of what's in that box for us?
Absolutely. So Sky H2O makes fresh, clean water out of the atmosphere, which is called atmospheric water generation is the technology. And arguably atmospheric water generation is kind of a game-changing solution, because for the first time, we now humans can make fresh water pretty much at any place and at any time. So the atmospheric water generation applications, dovetail very nicely, like into clean energy, similar to, let's say, solar, how solar has revolutionized the energy grid, allowing also energy to be produced any place and at any time, like on your rooftop, which ultimately provides the user with self-reliance and independence, really self-sustainability, which might be the key to survival or thriving in the future ahead.
Alex, in the United States, we never think of water shortage never think of electricity shortage, with the exception of here in Miami during hurricanes. We never think of food shortages. I was having a similar conversation with Nathanael probably 2 weeks ago, and we couldn't agree that a food shortage could happen. And then last week, or a few days ago, we were getting news of people waiting 16, 18 hours in line in San Antonio to get to a food bank. And so, you are an expert on water. So, why did you start this? Why did you start Sky H2O? That, at least for the United States, seems useless, right? Because we have water.
Well, I committed myself almost 20 years ago, my professional life, to finding technologies, creating businesses that essentially are in harmony with nature, that are sustainable and resilient. Sky H2O actually is the fourth clean technology company that I've brought to life. So I'm somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. Most of my experience has been in clean energy. I've actually been on the front end of developing close to 200 different solar projects, both in the United States and internationally. And approximately 5-6 years ago, I turned my sights to water, as California was in an epic water drought where it was projected many parts of California, significant parts of Southern California, were going to literally run out of water within 6-9 months if something didn't happen. We did have that winter, the wettest winter ever, and again the wettest winter ever. So in the meantime, in California, the water stress, the immediate water stress, is not there. But that did, open my eyes and educate me more on what's happening globally. And the fact of the matter is, there are today close to 4 billion people worldwide living under water stress. That's essentially half the globe.
More than half, right? More than half.
Yeah, more than half of the world. And according to many, even like the World Economic Forum, I would say before the coronavirus, water stress was considered the greatest threat to global economic stability. And so I thought I should try to help on that front. And like I said, being a good California technology-based person who over here, and we've been very successful at solving technology problems, I thought I would put my time and effort towards that.
So when I'm listening to you, Alex, I can't help but thinking about the way that we as humans perceive things, and there's something of time scale that's fundamental to the discussion that you're having. You've been looking at water. If you look at the global sustainability objectives, the food water energy nexus, that there's a lot of conversation around there, and you're talking about a slow rolling crisis. You're talking about, we know in 9 months, we know in 6 years, we know there's a time scale where it's a slow developing crisis, but it's a real crisis. Can you compare? So you've been looking at crisis for a while. Can you compare the characteristics of the water crisis to some of the faster rate crisis that we're experiencing under the recent coronavirus? And can you do a compare and contrast between a water crisis and a health crisis that we're seeing now?
I think they're a little bit similar. One of the challenges I think we have as humans, and really one of the challenges we have under our dual economic system, nothing really starts to happen until there's a crisis. In other words, once the well runs dry, that's when people get busy and start coming up with solutions. I couldn't tell you how many dozens and dozens of projects we have in queue, but the local entity who perhaps wants to move forward on the water project, they just aren't quite in the crisis mode yet, but it's coming. So it would be nice if we could be more strategic and more see more thoughtful, perhaps believe science a little bit more. But it is what it is.
We're seeking to develop a little bit of coalition and a little bit of congruence around this idea of sort of this cured at home thought where there's a medical system, and there's a delivery system, and there's medicine, and there's medical equipment, and there's a remote professional. We're not doctors. We're not in the medical industry at all. We're entrepreneurs, and I'm a systems engineer that's built. I developed satellite architectures serially, 30 in the last 7 years. Some of them are on orbit. So my view in terms of like building systems out is maybe a little bit out of the field, but in the water crisis that you've been looking at, and can you kind of talk to some of those lessons of the water crisis making opportunity, and sort of expand on what you see what the opportunities you see developing because of the crisis, as our infrastructures and our institutions are really just grappling with this rapidly evolving situation?
Yeah. Well, there's a number of things that are affecting in creating the water crisis that we have, and the two big themes are, one, of course, drought, which is primarily also being caused by climate change, where we're seeing weather patterns, dramatically worldwide. So that's kind of the most obvious to the eye. But what's maybe a little less obvious, but what actually is worse, is the toxicity of water. And as industrial infrastructures, our modern communities, as they're growing older, areas like around Detroit, you've heard of the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, places around Tokyo and Liverpool, these older industrial areas that have been built upon lead pipes and other kinds of infrastructures that have not been properly taken care of because the local communities don't have the money to do that, and now the water at the tap is poisoned. So those are two areas. They're different areas. Sometimes they're the same area. In Mexico, for example, they have kind of the double whammy of drought plus decrepit infrastructure. But those are the things that need to be solved, and solved quickly.
Well, but then we also have overconsumption because of concentration in one spot, right? Here in Miami, all the natural, pardon my English, aquifers, we are draining them faster than they can replenish. So unless we desalinize the ocean, or we take the water from the humidity in the air, like you do, I forgot the number, but I think that fresh water is 1% of all the water in the planet. So the other 99% is ocean water that we cannot drink as is because it's salty water.
That's absolutely right. And like I said earlier, the two main themes driving water scarcity is drought and the toxicity. But there's so many other themes too, including that really we have blindly exploited groundwater. If you go to the Central Valley in California, you'll see roads that are 1, 2, 3 feet lower than they were. That's all changing the topography because the groundwater is not there.
Wow.
Only recently, technology over the past 4 or 5 years, through GPS basically technology, we can for the first time see under the Earth's surface to see how much water is in these, if you will, water banks underground surface, and they're 10%, they're 5% of what they should be. For example, the Arabian Peninsula, where you have Abu Dhabi and Dubai and so forth, those were areas that there's a lot of groundwater. Nothing's left. It's all completely empty. So it's a big challenge.
I heard this is a little bit off topic, but let's run with it. The in India they had I heard that this is in North India. A friend of mine, he's in technology, and he was speaking of his home village where the wells were dry. They
Absolutely.
doubled, tripled the depth of the well, made no difference, and they even took off the roofs and they started backfilling the boreholes to try and bring the aquifer back up. No, it didn't make any change, but they were successful in restoring the aquifer. And what they did was they got about a 25-cent gauge, a water gauge, and everybody there uses the bucket. They take it out of the ground, put it in the bucket, and they had a gauge that read how much water they used for washing their hands, for taking a drink, for anything. And everybody in the community saw the gauge, the measurement of the water of the water consumption. And within 2 years, it restored the aquifer, and the wells were wet again with no significant climate events or changing climate trend. Yeah, I wonder in terms of just on the consumption. You know, we have just to bring it to a healthcare thought. We have lots of consumption, including we have an appetite for healthcare in the U.S. and there's an expectation. Can you talk to expectations for modifying behaviors around consumption in general?
Well, I have to say, first and foremost, I don't trust any water that comes out of a tap. You could have the most pristine original source coming out of the foothills of the Sierras or Rocky Mountains or something like, but ultimately that water is going through miles and miles and miles of infrastructure. And, you know, many of the homes are older, there's rust, and by the time it comes out of the tap, it's been affected all kinds of things. So I would say, first and foremost, what everybody should do in America is filter your water at the tap. I think that's the most important thing to do. If you have, if you don't feel comfortable enough with that, then I would suggest buy some kind of good bottled water. And when it comes to bottled water, I think you should look for spring water, not filtered water, but fresh spring water. And then when you look for fresh spring water, I would suggest you look for containers that are larger bottle sizes, because we also have a big problem with one-time use plastics. And there's plastic seepage too. So I would stay away from all those smaller individual sized plastic bottles and try to, like, as a minimum, go with like 1 gallon size water bottles and up. I think that's what you can do at the home front level the best to protect yourself.
Gentlemen, I'll ask you an impossible question, and that is to predict. In my case, I was born in Argentina. There in Argentina, every 10 years, we have a gigantic economic crisis that we ourselves create. And, and every 10 years, we go through all sorts of shortages, cash, food, electricity, whatever you can imagine, we experience every 10 years. Well, there's like a 7-year recovery and a 3-year horrific downturn, and the trend is down when you look at a 100-year period. And so here, well, I live in Miami since 2001. Here in the United States, we are not accustomed to any shortages. If we lose internet for 1 minute, we go into panic. So would it be possible that because of coronavirus and because of the economic crisis that comes with it, there's already 22 million people who went unemployed in the last month. Could it be that we experience those shortages that are so frequent or periodic in Argentina? Food shortages, cash shortages, water shortages, etc.
Yeah, I absolutely believe we will find disruptions in the supply chains of certain goods and products. I'm not an expert to predict, which ones, but I do view the coronavirus really as a war, and I can't even imagine a more uh, despicable war than this, because on two fronts. Number one, it's happening globally, everywhere at the same time. I mean, it's going on in South Africa, in Germany, in Japan. I mean, it's attacking the entire world at the same time. And the enemy is invisible. You don't know when it's coming. So it's unbelievably difficult. And like you said, well, we now have just in the last weeks more than 22 million people unemployed. It's very difficult to understand who's considered mission critical and not mission critical. So we definitely are going to see supply chain disruptions. We're already seeing some first ones. When it comes to water, I'm sure there will be certain towns or regions that will have some disruptions where perhaps people can't properly go to work and provide the services needed to ensure for safe, clean, reliable water infrastructure. I don't know, maybe there are going to be shortages of bottles to bottle the water. It's very difficult to predict, but at a high level, I think there's going to be some challenges as we hopefully, over the next year or two, work our way out of post coronavirus war.
Nathaniel, you have a more American view, probably, right? Where you think that shortages are not to be expected.
Well, there's a difference between not to be expected and how we manage it. I think there's an element of social unrest that is crippling the supply chain the world over, and I think that the values that the U.S. is built on has a pretty strong insulative value or insulative strength against some of those social unrest aspects. Not immune, obviously. We see a social unrest on the rise when situations become less tractable. You can't quite understand it. So your characterization, Alex, of an invisible enemy, and this sort of it's everywhere to everybody and invisible. That characterization really strikes home. One piece that Will and I wrestle with it. Will for the record, Will and I agree on almost nothing, and by the time we do agree on it, it almost always works.
So like a married couple.
It's a little intense sometimes. So one of the things that we really struggle with on who is the enemy. We're trying to develop. We see the opportunity, we see the need, and we see so much divisiveness in the narratives that are being developed around this unseen enemy, right? And so that we see those as extremely chaos building. And so to actually build clarity and message, you do need to have something to push against. So given that you brought up what you described a war, and you described the sort of the enemy scene, if you will, what are the attack vectors that we can use?
Well, I think first and foremost, we cannot politicize the coronavirus, and I think it's imperative that our politicians who lead this country get coordinated and get in a line and have very productive programs that they're not fighting about.
Amen.
And, unfortunately, so far, different stimuluses that have happened, there's been too much fighting, bickering, watering down, gamesmanship that has not allowed, I think, us to be as efficient and effective at fighting the coronavirus as we should. Not pointing any fingers, we're not doing a bad job, but I think it could always be better. There's other countries who do a better job. So I just love to see on the national, state, and local level, things more in sync.
Gentlemen, we will wrap up in about 5 minutes. There's 2 points that I like to cover before we finish. One is, so when we present a problem, we try to present a solution. And today we presented a larger problem of several possible shortages. We will cover the other possible shortages in other interviews here with Alex is about potential water shortage. And so in my case, in Argentina, we had to learn how to take care of our own families. And luckily in the United States, the 325 million, I believe, have found ways for the government to take care, but perhaps that has blindsided us into that what happens if that government one day is unable because of whatever reasons, because the government gets overwhelmed or etc. And so Alex product is a way of self-sufficiency, which in some cases becomes necessary. I haven't performed due diligence on Alex's system. I have performed due diligence on Alex. So I buy whatever he sells, but before I would buy, I would do due diligence on the equipment also, right? But I trust him as an honest entrepreneur and person. So Alex, what you Sky H2O is this like container size, so like a 40-foot container. And inside there's some black box magic. So air comes in. With the air, all the invisible droplets or particles of water. And so what your system does is it removes those invisible particles of water from the air and gives you fresh water at the end. And that's fresh water that you can drink.
Yeah, so our technology, our system, it's actually pretty easy to understand how it works. It's just very difficult to do. There's a lot of technology and intellectual property behind it. But on a high level, what happens is we suck in huge amounts of air with very efficient variable frequency fan systems. That air is then filtered. We have an industrial system that has a 3-level filter bank like what you'd have similar in a clean room, and the filtered air goes into essentially a compression chamber where that air is compressed. Similar like when you see an airplane flying in the sky, you see a compression stripe that's essentially water that's compressed out of the air. That compressed air then goes through what we call a coolerator. It's like a fins, almost like a radiator. And at that point, that compressed cool air becomes water. And we manage temperature level so it produces the maximum amount of water, which is called the dew point. So it's above the freezing point, and we find the optimal dew point. That water then basically drops down in the container. It goes through a UV system, and now you have basically pure raw water. You can drink a little bit of it, but that's not necessarily the healthiest water. So depending on the use of the water, then it goes through a filtration or preparation system where it's mineralized and can then be bottled or put into your system however you want to use it.
And we have some problem with the audio. So your unit, if it would be used for, say, a small community, can possibly provide with fresh water to about 15 to 20 households, correct?
Yeah, or maybe more. So at this moment in time, we're a young company. We've introduced our first flagship product. We call it the AWS Maximus. We do have in our innovation pipeline further systems that are smaller and bigger. This particular one has a footprint of about 4-foot international shipping container and is rated or designed to produce more or less optimal conditions about 2,800 gallons of water a day. So depending on how much water is being used by households or individuals, probably could provide water for 15, 30 houses. You can also daisy chain multiple systems together. You don't have to necessarily deploy one. You could have 2, 3, 5 systems that could perhaps provide water for a hospital, a school campus, things that are of mission critical importance.
Like a hospital.
Absolutely. Yeah, hospital is a good application.
So if anyone is concerned about not having water, they only need one of your units, electricity or solar panels, right? Either one, and air, and then you produce water for them on the spot.
Yeah, the system's designed to to be powered off of electricity. You can connect it to the grid or off grid, and where that electricity comes from, whether it's traditional energy generation or renewables, wind, solar, it doesn't matter. We don't care because kilowatt hour is a kilowatt hour. So for example, in your region of the world, we have lots of islands in the Caribbean who have very often energy problems, water problems, and so forth. This actually creates a very nice islanding solution.
And in the future, you plan to have smaller units for residential use?
In the future, we likely will introduce also smaller residential type systems, but I must admit our plans before going to smaller residential systems is actually go to even bigger systems that could provide a meaningful amount of water for larger type customers, municipalities and government and so forth.
So the very last minute, we were talking about curedathome.org off the record, and you had a couple comments, ideas, etc. Anything that you would like to ask on air?
I mean, in general, I really like the concept and business that you're introducing. I think it's well needed because it goes right into the theme of self-reliance, independence, resiliency. I think as we exit out of COVID, or the coronavirus, people are really just going to have to take a lot more responsibility for themselves. And, it's not realistic, I think, that one's going to be able to run to the hospital for every little pain. So to have services that you can do at home, just happening where businesses are going online at home, shopping is going online at home, education is going on at home. I think a theme of healthcare that's well needed. I do worry that the right professionals need to be involved to ensure that healthcare treatment processes are being done properly. But I'm confident in your organization that you know how to find those right people to help to build a good resilient program.
Thank you. Nathaniel, how would you like to close today's interview?
Yeah, no, I just really appreciate you being taking some time to kind of look at sort of a totally different path from where we're headed, and I'll just to comment on your the sort of the support and the process. I'm used to building satellites with 9 zeros of reliability is pretty normal. Like you need to have that one subsystem working out at 9999999% reliability. And so when you're coming in for healthcare, the standard of reliability is a lot lower. Surprisingly, yet the availability to the right information is where it becomes critical. And I'll just put a shout out to anybody watching this. We saw the need. You can see on our website the structure of where we're going. just to Alex's point, we have a panel of medical professionals to give us a first level scrub. We'll just put an open recruiting call right here in the show. If you're interested in what we're doing, we need your help, especially from the medical community. A lot of the people that we're working with right now are actually some people in the New York, some of our friends in the New York hospital systems and the state healthcare systems right now. They have other priorities. If you have capacity, we really would covet your input, especially in the area of respiratory and obviously coronavirus related areas. Thanks again for watching, and if you we'll put it in the link down below, but make sure you check out skyh2oinc.com and check out what Alex is doing as we're going to this place where maybe infrastructures aren't just the same as they've always been. Take a look out for where you're going, either in your business or in your community, or just in your family. Thanks so much for watching.
Alex, how would you like to close the call?
Well, Will and Nathanael, I thank you very much for this time. I also thank you for all the things that you're doing. I love your new initiative. What gives me hope and confidence, foremostly in America post-coronavirus, is the fact that America, more than anything else, is built upon entrepreneurship and creativity, and basically just people, making things happen. And that's what you're doing. There's so many others like that, and those are the people, those are organizations that are going to help pull us out of the mud and get our lives back to where we want them to be. So thanks a lot for everything you're doing.
Alex, thank you very much for your time and your kind words. For our viewers, if you like what you are doing, as Nathanael just mentioned, we need your help, not only the professionals, also everyone who believes that finding alternative ways to not overwhelm our hospitals and not to endanger the doctors and nurses who are trying to save us. We need your help in spreading the message. So if you share, if you like, if you subscribe to this channel, so then the next interviews become available. And so thank you to the two of you gentlemen for your wisdom and your time, and thank you for all our viewers, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Stay safe and secure. Bye-bye.